Welcome to LeapFrogBI Academy course CT120, PSA Components. During this course, we are going to first define a PSA component, going to discuss the role of a PSA component. We're going to, of course, demonstrate creating a PSA component. We'll also be further discussing record time, as well as load status tracking. All right, so to get started, what is a PSA component? Well, we've talked about this briefly in our development workflow course, but to recap, the PSA component is an area where we are going to consolidate all versions of all records that we collect from the source system. The stage component is a volatile area. We're going to trunk and load stage each day, but PSA is different. We're going to only load records into PSA. We're never going to modify existing records in PSA at all. And why are we doing this? Well, the obvious reason is that the source system may or may not persist data for the time period that we would like to see it persisted. A lot of source systems get data gets archived in them. Some of them don't persist the data at all. This gives us an opportunity to persist the data as long as we choose. So in here, this PSA will likely be some of the largest tables within your data mart. You'll want to put that in its own file group so you can manage that data separately. Additional to just the persistence characteristics, we also use PSA to buffer our source systems from the loads that would be required if we ever need to do a full reload of our data mart. Because the PSA is there, we don't have to go back to the source system. We can just reload based on the PSA data. There's other advantages. Typically in PSA, we collect all fields from the source tables that we include in our data flow. That allows us to make minor changes without having to go back to our source system once again. It's quite simple once we've already collected the data to just make a change. For example, like say we need to add an attribute to a dimension, we could just simply add that attribute to our dimension sourced from the PSA, and we're all set. Okay, so that's what a PSA's role is. Let's talk about record time for a moment. So the record time, which we are going to assign in PSA, is the time that the business or organization considers the record to be effective. In this case, a special offer would have a record time that is as of the time that special offer was effective. We're going to be using the modified date as the record time, because if a record is modified in this special offer table, the time that it is modified is the time that that record is effective to the business. Now, why are we assigning a record time? We're doing this because it's going to make the process of handling slow change dimension tracking in our dimensions, as well as our foreign key lookups from our facts to dimensions, extremely simple. In fact, LeapFrogBI will handle all of that internally. All we need to do is to assign the record time in PSA. All right, so let's jump over to our project and create a couple of PSA components. So I'm navigating over to the PSA area. I'm going to create a new component. I'm going to use this PSA main component type. Select that. Give us a name. We're doing sales promotion. Oh, sorry. What was the name of that? Special offer. Sorry. Special offer. And we're going to source this from our special offer stage table. We're going to place it in our PSA connection. And when I'm done here, this component will be complete. So I'll just go ahead and put the status complete. There we go. We have our PSA component. I'm going to jump over to the details of this component and finish configuring it. First of all, you notice that all of the fields that were outputs of our stage component are now included in this PSA component. This is the default behavior. What I need to do, however, is assign the record time. So I'm going to modify this PSA definition, and under record time, I'm going to select modified date. And that is just as we've set up already within our data flow diagram. We said the record time was going to be the modified date. So extremely simple there. That takes care of the record time. Now I need to select the fields that I'm going to be tracking changes on. What this does is gives me the opportunity to exclude some fields for tracking changes. For example, the row grid. I don't necessarily need to track changes on a row grid, so I can just say that's not going to be tracked. And that's pretty much all I want to do here. I'll just say done. Now I am really all set here for deploying this PSA. It would do everything I wanted to do, with the exception of one thing, and that is that we're going to want to track changes on this dimension, or track the load status, I should say, on the dimension records. Remember, we have our dimension source here, which is a transform, and its role is to extract the records from PSA that have not been processed yet. Well, to do so, we got to know the process status, or the load status of these records in PSA. So we need a flag in here that we can set initially to unprocessed, so that they'll be collected on this dimension source transform. And then later on, we're going to set those to processed by using this PSA component here. So let's go ahead and create that. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to add a field to my output, and that field is going to be based on an expression which just has a constant value of 0. And I'll just say that 0 is going to be my unprocessed value. So I'm going to go to my expression area, create a new expression. The type of expression I'm creating is a constant value. And I'm just going to use, we can use a tiny int. And I'm going to call this my dimension load status. Check the name of that dimension so I get it right here. Promotion is what we're going to call it. Promotion. And then I'm going to just say 0. So you can see that this expression is going to create this little piece of SQL here, which is cast 0 as tiny int, and save that. Now that I have an expression available, I'm going to add that to my output fields. Say new field, and use my DLS promotion. You can see that it does know that this is a tiny int, and that's all I need to do. So now in my output fields, I do have this DLS promotion. Okay, so in this case, I already have from my source system a row grid. Because I have that, I know that I can uniquely identify that record. I'm just going to say we can depend on that row grid being what we would expect it to be. So we can depend on that record having the same, or no record having the same grid. And that's important because here, when we get to our update load status component, we're going to want to be able to join our dimension source to our PSA, and we're going to do that on our row grid. When we do so, we're going to update that flag to a 1 because at that point those records will be processed. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set up the PSA component for each of the areas within our data flow diagram where it requires one, such as here in the product, we have one here. I'm not going to do these dimension update load status components yet. We'll come back to that at a later point. We have a couple of them in the location, and we also have some in the fact sales area. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I've created all of the PSA components. You can see them here. Let's take a look at one of them. Sales territory was one that we need to create to source our location dimension. So once again, I set the record time. We're tracking changes on all fields. Created a dimension load status expression, which was then used to source this output field, DLS location, just constant value of 0 by default. We'll later update it to 1 after records are processed. And then I'm collecting a statistic. We can see that this modified date is in use. So we're collecting a statistic here, and we're setting the default value to 1900-0101. Now, the reason we're collecting this statistic on PSA and not on sales is that we don't want to update this statistic until records that are collected are processed into PSA successfully. Now, I can see that this is in use, and that's because I've already assigned this statistic to my stage component. In fact, if I look down here at my usage map, I can see this field is used in a statistic, and that statistic is used here as a value for my source parameter. To verify that, I could just jump straight over to my source parameter. I'm in my stage component now, and I can see that I have assigned that value to that parameter. Okay, so that's been done for each of the stage components. Take a look at one more real quick here, subcategory. If I look at that, value has been assigned. And now I am in good shape to continue on with the development of my transformations. We're going to come back to the PSA updates, update components after we can finish all of the other components. So there will be another video in this course, but you may want to go ahead and hold off on watching that until you complete the transformation dimension and fact component courses. But it's no big deal if you want to go ahead and watch that. You probably could follow what we're doing there at this point as well. So we'll see you in the next course.